Oh, and I should have shared my screen. Let me do that too. Share screen. Oh, make sure I'm on the right tab first. Oops. That's not what I wanted. That's the whole screen. Share. That's better. Okay. Hello, folks. Welcome to Cluster API Provider Azure, our biweekly check-in meeting. It is March 12th, 2026. As I'm sure you're all aware, we are a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and so we stick by their rules of conduct, which we can summarize as everybody be excellent to each other. And without any further ado, we can move on. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Matthew, or you're Matt or Matthew?
I'm Matt.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so yeah, I thought I'd just come in and say hi because I'm showing up to the project with an enormous monster of a PR. Um, um, I've I've actually I've been really happy with the amount of review attention it's got. So maybe I didn't need to turn up, but uh, yeah, I will anyway. Um, uh, shall I explain what it's for, or
Yeah,
does
sure.
everybody?
We don't have any other agenda items at this point, I don't think, so we can just get right into it if you want to. I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't actually reviewed it, but I know Willie has, but it'd probably help if you want to go over it. That'd be great.
Yeah, even though I've reviewed it, it'll be helpful to just hear you talk about it.
yeah. So the why? I'll start with why. Is Yeah, we've got a few packages with interesting diamond dependencies. So essentially, we've got packages which pull in multiple CAPI providers, um, but you can hit this problem even if you're just your own provider, and you're only pulling in CAPC and you have a controller runtime dependency, which is different to CAPC's controller runtime dependency. So essentially, the if I talk about the specific controller that I'm working on, it's an operator. It's for installing CAPI itself in OpenShift clusters, and it pulls in the API packages, just the API packages of multiple CAPI providers. Um, Now, in most cases, that doesn't pull in many dependencies. There was a bit of a push for this a few years ago to try and minimize the number of dependencies you have when importing the API package of a CAPI provider. But yeah, for Kappa, CapG, and CapZ, they all pulled in controller runtime, and all for the same reason because they all followed the original cube builder pattern of having webhooks in the API package. What that means is that if if there's any discrete and the problem with controller runtime specifically is that they have historically been very bad at Semver. So if any two of your dependencies, including your own one, ha have different controller runtime dependencies, then you have an irreconcilable compile issue. And it becomes extremely difficult to manage. So yeah, the ask generally is that yeah, if we import the API package, then all we want is your stuff, and we just the stuff we need in order to interact with um, typed objects, um, and we don't want accidental controller runtime. Um, so yeah, this PR pulls the webhooks out of the API directory. For Kappa and CapG, that was actually really easy um, uh, because they had an awful lot less code uh, uh, in there. Essentially, they didn't have defaulting and validation in there. They didn't have the test suite in there. They didn't have a bunch of other stuff in there. And quite frankly, I told Claude to go look at Cappy, copy that, and it was all done very easily in a few minutes, and it was quite clean. I gave Claude the same task on CapZ. It spent 144 of Red Hat's dollars, and then I threw away the result.
Yeah.
So um, and did it manually. Uh, so yeah, that it was somewhat more complicated. So there's an awful lot more code to move um, for CapZ. There's also a bunch of exported APIs um, from the API package, which need handling somehow. And I go over this in the PR description. Essentially, there's only two fundamental things that you can do with those dependencies because the dependencies exist because or the functions exist because the webhooks need them, and some of the functions are exported because the which I assume is experimental. Hey Joel, because the experimental API package also has webhooks, so there's a cross-package dependency. So validation functions implemented in the main API package had to be exported so that they could be used by the experimental API package.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there's fundamentally only two approaches here. You can either export everything. If you're going to move the webhooks out, you now need to either export everything that the webhooks need, and quite a lot of it was private, um, or you have to remove it all. And you can't even alias it in place anymore because if you alias it, then you pull in the transitive dependency of wherever you moved it to, or you have a cyclic dependency. So it all gets very annoying.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's only those two approaches, and I picked one, which is get rid of everything, which I suspect was never really intended to be there anyway. Joel called me on that, by the way, because he does that sort of thing. Um, so I spent a ton of time exploring the other option, and my view after spending many hours on it was it looks worse. So my recommendation is to go with this one. It's a breaking API change. This is the very thing that we get annoyed with controller runtime for doing.
Mhm.
It breaks the Go API. It doesn't break the Cube API, by the way. There's no diff in the CRDs. But yeah, essentially um, everything used by the webhooks is moved out of the API package. And if it was exported, that is a breaking change. Joel, go ahead.
So apologies for missing the beginning of this. I was on a one-to-one that overran. Um, I am generally in favor of what Matt has done. There was only the one bit of feedback that I had, which was around, like, obviously this breaking change that he's just mentioned, which is why I raised my hand. Um, there are there are potential use cases, and I realize that I actually probably don't have an exact example, but there are potential use cases where someone has imported these validation functions. So it was like validate Azure cluster or whatever it was. And there were a handful of exported validate functions. With the current PR those are no longer exported, right, Matt?
Yeah, they are now all they're moved into an internal package. So
Yeah.
even though they are exported, they're only exported to within in the
Yeah.
module.
So the
Mhm.
one potential improvement I could see is if we had a public validations package that then aliased all of the internal validations. And I think that would mean that there is a migration path for anyone who did happen to be using these validation functions that are currently in the API package to at least be able to still leverage the validation functionality by changing the import on where they're doing that. The issue, of course, with that is it's a public API. Do we want to make that choice to have those all exported? In other places, we do. So it's not like this would be setting a new precedent. This would be following some existing precedent, but it's a choice to make.
Is are there was there anything parallel to that in GCP or um, the sorry, AWS, or are we the only ones who had these sort of validation functions public?
I went and looked. Uh, so the other places, Joel, that I think you're talking about are mostly Kube APIs. Yeah, I went and looked. I'm not aware of any other CAPI provider that exports these functions.
Yeah.
And certainly, I went and checked. There are two operators within Red Hat that 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 have this pattern of uh, of importing many CAPI providers. There's the one I'm working on, and there's also Hypershift. And the Hypershift does validation, but it implements its own. So it was not using the validation exported um, by CAPC.
Right.
And yeah, and I'm not aware of any others. But
Yeah.
which is not to say that they don't exist.
That's right. We're always surprised, although
Yeah.
it feels like this was sort of probably not initially intentional that they were all exported, or maybe it was. But I guess I would be surprised, although I have been surprised uh, that this would break something. But we, like Joel was saying, we really don't know.
The,
Um,
it was like a weird subset as well. It was like only a handful of things that were exported. And yeah, I'm not aware of anything in CAPI exporting the validation functions, but if you were to go to KK, you can find validation functions exported for every piece of the KK APIs. So in theory, people are using those. I know actually of some uses of those validation functions. It's whether we want to support that in CAPI or not. There isn't precedent within CAPI. So we could just say, yeah, we're going to break this and see if anyone complains. It's not hard, I don't think, to add those aliases later if we
yeah,
did break someone. But it's something we would have to be aware of, call out in the release notes and say, look, if we broke you, please let us know.
yeah. My gut feeling is I'd be fine with the ask for forgiveness approach that you were just describing, because it seems unlikely. And if we did break someone, hopefully they would scream about it, and then we could backfill a public package to accommodate them. Uh, what do you think, Willie? Does that?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, and we can just do a follow-up if that's the case. It is weird that it's only some of the webhooks that were exported, so I guess if someone was really like using them, maybe they would have asked for more exported. I don't know.
Yeah.
Matt, did you look at all at like the blame to see if they were previously private and then exported? Because it could well be that someone came along and said, hey, I need this exported. Please export this for me.
I did not. What I did do was correlate exported functions against internal uses. And every exported function, except one, which we decided was probably dead code, had an internal user. So yeah, the pattern appears to be, although I didn't check the Git history, um, uh, appears to be that they were created private, and then the experimental API directory was added with its own webhooks, and wherever functionality was to be copied, the function was exported.
That sounds very likely. Well, yeah, I don't know if you would have time or inclination to do that exercise and actually just look at git blame and see maybe historically someone. But I think you're probably right. It was mostly driven by the EXP package. I should know this, but it's been so long since these things landed that I would have forgotten anyway.
I can check that out and add a comment in the PR.
That'd be great if you have time. But I think as the two overall active maintainers, Willie and I are pretty much okay with the ask forgiveness approach that is already in the PR. So we could probably forge ahead that way and just make sure we call it out in the release notes. Speaking of which, we're planning on doing a release next week, and this is a minor release, and this is the kind of thing that would be wonderful to land right before we do that. So it's planned for Monday, but we can always push it off a few days if we decide that this is something we really want to get in there sooner rather than later. Obviously, it needs some more review and all that, but I'm just saying, seems like that would be great if we could land this before the next or CAPZ 123. Do you agree with that, Willie?
Yeah, we can delay the release a little bit if just to get in, but I also want to make sure test grid looks good after. I mean, I'm sure it will, but just in case.
Sure.
And then yeah, I think yeah, we can just go ahead with seeing the- if someone comes to us and we broke their stuff. Maybe I'm not sure. I forgot if you had it in the PR, but do you have like a warning and or something in the docs? If you don't have that already, maybe that could be a part of the PR.
I don't know how you compile release notes, but yeah, I did add the release note. I could add a little bit more to the release note to say maybe highlight the potential for breakage and that the project is prepared to re-expose these symbols if necessary.
Yeah. We can probably just manually change the release note a little bit for this one.
Sure.
Yeah. So that should be fine.
Yeah, we can highlight it as a breaking change, which it literally is. Although hopefully it doesn't actually break anyone.
Yeah, we hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of follow-ons to this. So Brian Cox mentioned that I haven't touched the experimental package, which I did for Kappa and CapG. The so yeah, if we land this, we could look at doing the experimental package as well. Although we're not directly importing that, so that isn't on fire for me. But it would be a reasonable cleanup. Something else I think I called out in the PR description is in order to keep the diff size down, I've used a ton of dot imports. But yeah, if I had I've got a draft PR which removes the dot imports from replaces them with named imports, and it increases the diff size from 2,000 lines to 10,000 lines.
Oh,
So, but it's still like purely mechanical. So I didn't include it here because I figured it makes it easier to review if not quite every single line has changed, if most of them are still the same. Yeah, I can. There's a couple of follow-up cleanups I'd be prepared to do if you wanted that.
Yeah, dot imports obviously aren't ideal, but as long as the linter isn't actually screaming about them, then I'm fine with that.
I think I did have to shut the linter up.
Oh, okay, well,
So, but yeah, like I say, I used them for a specific reason for this PR.
yeah,
And I'm very happy to go and add a second mechanical PR which replaces them with non-dot imports.
yeah. No,
Um,
I think you made the right choice there. It's already fairly large, and
yeah,
uh, and we could just, as long as we even have just an issue saying re-enable the linter and get rid of the dot imports, that's sufficient, from my point of view, for future work. Whether or not you follow on, that would be great. Yeah, sorry, I haven't actually had time to look at this, but I'm glad other people have. But I'll try and give it a go over today or tomorrow.
there was another interesting one on there, by the way. Jack mentioned the dates. So in the newly created files, um, yeah, and that's been through a couple of iterations actually. So in the first one, I'd set some of them to 2026, and Willie, you asked me to put those back, which I did. And then Jack said actually KK is not including copyright years at all now. So I've added a couple of extra commits which remove the copyright date from all of the newly created files, which includes all of the moved files,
Ah,
and also fixes up the boilerplate verifier to permit boilerplate without copyright years.
okay.
But apparently, this is a thing now. I didn't know
Yeah,
Joel was aware of it. So
Yeah, I had no idea.
yeah,
Jack and I actually disagree on this one, but I don't feel very strongly because uh, several years ago I went to like a, legal advice for coders thing where they were saying when you drop a file in there and you put a copyright year in it, that's the assertion of copyright, and that's when the clock begins ticking on whatever it is in the United States, like 120 years or something now. Uh, and so theoretically, way, way in the future, if someone wants to dispute our copyright over a specific file, they can point to the date that was there. Um, and so 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 ideally, when you introduce a new file, you put the current year. This is my previous understanding. You put the current year it was created in there, and then you never touch it. And some people want to go in and rev all the copyright years every time they touch a file, and that actually, I think that's incorrect legally. But I've seen that KK now is like, we just don't even include the copyright year. And in practice, I can't imagine a world where someone would be caring about these files that far in the future and or parsing the specific dates out of individual files to try and assert some wedge in the copyright that we have over the file. So I think it's fine to do what Jack is saying and just not put copyright in. It certainly makes life simpler going forward. Um, I wouldn't necessarily. I don't think we're. I don't think the idea is to go back and remove copyright from all the existing files. But certainly when we're changing them, and if there's any dispute, I think that's totally fine to just not include it. And thanks for doing that. Jack and I should talk about this and make sure we're on the same page because I don't think we totally agree. But in practice, it's just not going to matter, I'm sure. Having said that, I'm not a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Um,
uh,
cool. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, uh, um, what do you need from me now. I think somebody is going to have to override the API diff test failure in order to land this. So yeah, you may. In the PR description, I've been in detail. I've detailed every single failure reported by the API diff, um, uh, and they're all intentional. Um, Somebody might want to go and check that there's nothing in there that is unintentional. Um,
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
actually the API diff job is not required.
yeah, it's
Okay.
supposed to fail. It's just like noted marking that there is an API diff.
Yeah. Because in the real world, sometimes we break the API and we look at it closely and we're like, oh, that wasn't really intended to be part of the API anyway, uh, which is sort of the argument we're making here. So I don't know that we even need to override it. We can just, it'll merge without that.
cool.
So I guess if you have time, and if you don't, I don't think it's that big a deal. But if you have time to do a git blame or something, and just to just reassure us that there wasn't a different reason for making some of these public, and then maybe if you could create an issue saying we should follow on and try and clean up the linter and get rid of the dot imports. That's all I could think of. And then on our side, we just need to give it a final review and approve it. It sounds like, which we can hopefully schedule that today or tomorrow.
That'd
And
be great.
then, yeah. And then slightly longer term, like Willie was saying, we would want to let it sit in our main branch for a few days just to reassure ourselves that test grid didn't suddenly go south. And then hopefully include it in the 123 release.
Incidentally, you do still have another transitive dependency on controller runtime.
With the ASO?
No, not
Or
not with ASO.
oh,
The This was through CAPI V1 Beta 1. So the CapZ is still using the CAPI V1 Beta 1 API types.
that's true.
And because that is no longer a the hub type for controller runtime conversion purposes in CAPI, that means the V1 Beta 1 pulls in some APIs related to conversion webhooks. Sorry, not conversion webhooks, conversion. So the yeah, a short-term fix, that doesn't actually break me, so I'm not immediately upset about it, but it might be something to look at. The short-term fix for that would be to bump to V1 Beta 2. The longer-term fix, I think, would be to go and talk to the controller runtime folks, see if we can create a new API that allows conversion webhooks to be implemented outside of the API package, which is currently not possible.
Right.
So yeah, that's a longer term thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we hope to move to V1 Beta 2, although now that CAPI has made the end date for that even farther in the future, I don't know how urgent it is from our point of view, but it's something
Yeah,
obviously we should do.
yeah, they shouldn't have
Because
done that.
yeah, it really takes the pressure off, and it's obviously going to be a lot of work for all of us, and so I think that just means we're not going to do
Yes,
it as soon as we should.
it'll be an emergency later.
Yeah, that's how it always goes, right?
Yeah, I'm looking into it. I'd rather do it sooner rather than later, but yeah, that's on our roadmap.
Cool. Yeah, so I'll try and do that, and I'll create some issues for the follow-ups. And yeah, if this gets into a release next week, I would be over the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's
Cool.
see if we can do it.
Yeah, well, I'll take another look, and just throw another LGTM on it. I think either Matt or Jack will approve it. So yeah.
Great. Anything else you want to discuss about this? No?
I think so.
Let's pop back here. We don't have anything else on the agenda. So Willie, unless you want to grovel through PRs and issues, which I'm assuming you don't, we can call it good.
Yeah, I think we're good. I've been looking through that on the side, so kind of like look at all the stale PRs and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the release milestone, at least the stuff we'd assigned to it, we're in pretty good shape. And this is one of the few big PRs hanging out. So, all right. Well, let's call it good for today then. And thank you so much, Matt and Joel, for doing all this work and also for showing up and explaining it because that was very helpful for me, especially.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you.
All right. See you on Slack or see you here again in a couple weeks.
All right, see ya.